Abbiamo calato ogni torre.
NATO's billion-dollar missile doctrine may have just met a new problem. Russia's S-500 Prometheus is now officially on combat duty, and that matters because this is not simply another air defense system. The S-500 is designed to operate at the highest end of Russia's air and missile defense architecture, precisely where ballistic and high-altitude threats become the most difficult to deal with. But here is the real question. If Russia can build a specialized upper layer around systems like the S-400, what happens to the way NATO plans long-range strikes? Because the problem is not necessarily that the S-500 can stop every Western missile. We do not have enough public evidence to make that claim. The bigger problem is uncertainty. Where can high-value assets operate safely? Which targets can still be reached reliably? How many interceptors would a strike package have to overcome? And how much more expensive does a long-range strike become when the defensive network gets another layer? So is the S-500 really capable of challenging the foundations of Western precision strike doctrine, or is Russia creating something more subtle? A defensive architecture designed to make every long-range strike harder, more expensive, and more complicated. That is the question we need to examine. Think of Russia's air defense network as a system. The S-500 sits at the highest layer. The S-400 operates below it. Then come medium-range systems, short-range systems, radars, electronic warfare, and the various sensors connecting everything together. If the S-500 can genuinely take on part of the anti-ballistic and high-altitude defense mission, Russia would not necessarily have to use all of its most capable systems against every type of threat. And that matters, because in modern warfare, interceptor missiles are a resource. Radar coverage is a resource. Trained crews are a resource. Reaction time is a resource. And most importantly, the location of each system is a resource. An S-400 dealing with one threat cannot simultaneously perform another mission somewhere else. So the clearer the division of responsibilities becomes, the more efficiently the wider network can potentially operate. This is where the S-500 becomes interesting. Not because one system suddenly makes Russia immune to attack, but because it could take over part of the workload previously shared with other systems. That could give S-400s and other air defense platforms more freedom to perform different tasks. Now look at the other side. Ukraine and its Western supporters face a completely different problem. They have to decide which targets must be protected, which cities receive priority, which bases are most important, which infrastructure cannot be allowed to be hit, and which incoming missiles justify the use of expensive interceptors. That is the economics of modern warfare. An attacking missile does not necessarily have to cost more than the interceptor used against it. And if the attacker can continue launching different types of threats, while the defender has a limited number of interceptors, pressure on the defensive network keeps increasing. That is why the growing use of Russian ballistic missiles matters so much in the current conflict. Recent analysis indicates that Russia launched more than 120 missiles categorized as Iskander-M, S-400 and KN-23 systems during July. So this is no longer about one missile. It is about volume. And once volume increases, the defender has to make increasingly difficult choices. What should be intercepted? What can be left? What must be protected? And how many interceptors can be committed? Now imagine Russia gradually building a more specialized anti-ballistic layer around strategically important areas. That does not automatically make Western weapons ineffective, but it could make one thing considerably harder: targeting. Because the better protected a network of command centers, radars, military bases, and strategic facilities becomes, the more effort may be required to find a viable way through it. And this is where long-range strike planning begins to change. Not because missiles suddenly become useless, but because high-value targets become more difficult to reach reliably. However, there is one important part of the S-500 story that is often overlooked. A system like this is not just about interceptors. It needs radars, sensors, communications, command networks, and all of them have to survive. That matters because the war in Ukraine has already demonstrated that modern air defense systems can themselves become targets. Ukraine has previously claimed to have struck a 98L6 Yenisei radar associated with the S-500 complex in Crimea. That claim should be treated carefully, but the underlying problem is real. An air defense system cannot operate effectively without its sensors. If a radar is destroyed, damaged, forced to relocate, or loses connectivity, the interceptor capability behind it can also be affected. So the S-500 is not some magical shield. It is still a network, and networks can be attacked. That brings us to the most interesting part. If Russia expands its S-500 deployment, the West will also have an incentive to expand its counter-air defense capabilities, not simply by developing faster missiles, but by searching for radars, command nodes using decoys, electronic warfare, standoff weapons, and multi-axis attack strategies. In other words, the S-500 could contribute to a much larger competition. Not a competition between one missile and one interceptor, but a competition between sensors and stealth, radars and electronic warfare, interceptors and saturation, offensive missiles and defensive missiles. And that is far more relevant to the current conflict, because we are already seeing that air defense is not simply a technological problem. It is a problem of stockpiles, production, logistics, target prioritization, and the ability to keep the entire network operational over time. That is why the development of the S-500 needs to be viewed carefully. Russia does have a new system that has officially entered combat duty, but the numbers remain limited. Its actual capabilities are also not fully known, and there's still insufficient open-source evidence to conclude that the S-500 has proven itself in combat against NATO's long-range missile arsenal. So we should not fall into the claim that the S-500 now makes Western missiles useless. That is far too simplistic. The more interesting possibility is this. The S-500 could become one part of Russia's effort to make its strategic air defense architecture increasingly specialized. And if that happens, the S-400 does not have to do everything. The radars do not have to do everything. Each layer can be assigned a more specific role. And in a war of attrition, that kind of efficiency could become extremely important. So now let's think about this together. Do you think the S-500 will genuinely change the balance of missile defense in the region, or is its greatest value not simply its ability to intercept targets, but the way it could allow Russia to reorganize its entire defensive network? Because modern missile warfare is not determined solely by who has the fastest missile. It is also about who has the largest interceptor stockpile, who can replace lost systems, who can keep its radars operational, and who can keep its command network functioning. The S-500 may not provide all the answers, but its arrival suggests that the missile defense competition is entering an increasingly serious phase. And the real question is not, can the S-500 stop everything? No. The more relevant question is, how much does its opponent have to change in order to keep penetrating that defensive network? That, in my view, is what deserves our attention. If you see it differently, let me know in the comments. Let's analyze it together. And if you enjoy this kind of military and geopolitical analysis, support the channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing this video. Your support helps us continue examining military developments and the changing dynamics of modern conflict in greater depth. And one final disclaimer. This analysis is based on open-source information, official statements, and publicly available assessments. The actual characteristics, operational numbers, deployment locations, and combat effectiveness of the S-500 are not fully known to the public. Therefore, conclusions about its performance in real combat conditions should be treated as analysis, not as established fact. Use this information as a basis for thinking, not as absolute certainty. See you in the next analysis.